The first African-American Georgia state senator elected after Reconstruction has died at the age of 91. Senator Leroy Johnson was a man of many accomplishments. He was a lawyer, a teacher, a mentor to so many. Senator Johnson served in the legislature as a Democrat from 1963 to 1975. And there is the famous story of how he would desegregate the Georgia Capitol. His first day inside the Capitol, there were drinking fountains and restrooms separated by race. He had his pages at the time use the white restrooms and drinking fountains. Shortly thereafter, Governor Carl Sanders had those signs removed. A while back, I spent an afternoon with Senator Johnson in his Buckhead condo behind Phipps Plaza, and he told me about securing the comeback fight for Muhammad Ali in 1970 that was held in Atlanta. Senator Johnson said most states, they wouldn't deal with Ali because of his Vietnam stance and his refusal to be inducted into the military. Ali told the senator that he was forever grateful. He graduated from Morehouse in Clark, Atlanta. He attended law school in North Carolina in Chapel Hill. UGA was racially exclusive at that time. Funeral arrangements are pending.